So I start my algorithm for residential by setting my battery to operational and setting all the presets. It's basically the defaults that I'll be working with. Then I follow with the request button. I call a couple of sequences then will be defined later. I have the activate button, which activates, and then deactivate button, deactivates the button. Find request button, which is the first action that gets called when the person presses the button. He gets called inside the request button sequence. Also, the next one would be find cage, also gets called when the person presses the button. It basically opens the door if it's in the same level. If not, it figures out which cage you need, and then it adds it to the queue list. Closest cage is also part of that calculation. That's the only way I was able to really implement how to figure out which cage is closer. I use an absolute value to figure that out so I don't get any negative values. Next one, I use the sort queue list, so I have it in ascending order if we're going up or descending order if we're going down. Next is the activate and deactivate cage button, so those are the buttons inside when they get pressed. And then the figure out which cage button was pressed, I loop through the cage buttons to figure out which one it was. Cage control, this is a pretty long one. It just basically tells the logic behind how and when I should pick somebody up and how I should do it. The next ones would be the door and the closed door, open door, closed door. I basically have them called the deactivate buttons when it opens it and when it closes as well. And I also have it removed from queue when the door closes. Next ones are the check sensors and check weight, checking out if the weight or if there's any obstructions in the way. Move up and down, those are the actual physical movement of the cage. And then I have the statuses, which is idle, stopped, or not working. The next one too would be the display, just setting the display inside or outside to the cage floor, and then remove from queue, which I use to remove the first entry. Next one would be my commercial algorithm. I start by initiating it, setting it a little differently, just by the fact that I have it optimized for time of day. Later at night, I want it to start at the top instead of at the top of the column, the maximum floor range they have, and else they start in the floor 6th. And then, so the only difference is it's not a button press, it's a keypad input. I read the input, I get input from it, and then I send it and I use the next sequences. I have it defined at my range from column 1 and 2 and 3, 4, and they all service different floors, so there's no motion wasted. I find the column first because we got to figure out which column it is, and then inside there I'll figure out which cage inside the column I will need. If it's on the same floor, I open the door, and otherwise I call the closest cage and I return the cage that I need. Next, I'll send a request using my previous information I gotten, and then once I have that added to the queue list, I have to sort it, like in residential, going up in ascending order, going down in descending order. Next one would be the operate cage, so this would be like the logic, and then behind that I have the determine which cage is the closest. And the find button, figure out which button was called, and activate button and deactivate button so they can turn on and off when they're done using. Next one would be the open door, closed door. Basically it's pretty similar to the residential ones. And then it's got the check sensor, same ones before. Move up and down, those are the physical aspects of it. And then idle, stopped, not working, and last but not least, the remove from queue. So that's it.